You know, Liz, to begin with, most people who take some form of drugs are not necessarily dependent
No.
on them. And at the Global Commission, we actually went back in time to see the original way in which the international regimes drugs were set up in the 60s. Certain substances, such as alcohol and tobacco, which had very big commercial interests, would be excluded. Doesn't matter. You could be totally dependent on them. You could have terrible medical consequences, but they don't enter into it. And over dependence on tobacco or over dependence on alcohol did not, even alcohol, except for the extreme of it, did not carry the same kind of stigma, in fact. And we went from there into a hardening of these attitudes, because on top of them came incarceration, because the market was not regulated by government, but instead regulated by criminal organizations. Completely ridiculous. A market like this should not be regulated by criminal organizations. And the result of all of this is that we went along the path, the world did, of total stigmatization, because that was the only way, in fact, to justify the way that you destroy lives. That's what happened. Going to prison destroys lives. And this is what happened. In Australia, what would you like to have done? What would you like the government to do? What would you like your communities to do? How would you get them to look differently at this?
Look, I honestly think what the Global Commission is doing is exactly what we need to be doing. Drug law reform is exactly what we need. We spend so much money on policing people who use drugs. Put the money into treating and supporting people and having a really holistic approach around that, because different things will work for different people. You know, this prohibition is actually what creates most of the harms. You know, most people who drink alcohol dependently won't become homeless. A higher number of other drug users will be becoming homeless. And so I think really putting the money into where it needs to go, where it's economically sensible. So I would love to see the government do that. I feel two of the biggest issues that come to the top of my head around that is the terms in government are so short, and the finances that are spent in making this happen won't be recouped in their term in government. And so they look at, well, how do I get voted in at the next election? Not how do I make this country better, and how do I save people's lives, and how do I stop the destruction of families?
You have this foundation, Somebody's Child. How do you work with that? What do you do with them?
The big part of what Somebody's Child is about reducing the stigma. There's so much shame and so much stigma that even when people stop using drugs, they still hide the fact that they ever did, which is a great shame, because for me, it was people who used to use drugs who now don't, who told me that it was possible for me to stop, who gave me that hope, who gave me a chance of the life that I have today. And so Somebody's Child is about reducing the stigma, and it's about campaigning for drug law reform and really changing the way society views addiction, because I very much believe that if we can change the way society views people who use drugs, something will change.
So it seems to me that you're suggesting, and I agree very much with you, that there are many levels at which our approach needs to be changed over completely. And society itself has increased that stigma. It's become a self-fulfilling kind of work that the state doesn't even have to do anymore, because it's gotten so far that the stigma is attached almost without thought. And that part I find very difficult to change people's attitudes and minds. And I think it's going to take more probably than just decriminalizing. What do you think? Do you see any paths towards that?
I very much agree with you there. It is something that's quite ingrained in society. A person that I met once who became quite a good friend of mine, she was a midwife, and she was speaking about those junkie mothers who use drugs through their pregnancies, and not knowing that I was a person in recovery who had used drugs through a pregnancy. And when we got to meet and I sat down and I told her my story, just in that telling of my story, her entire stance on what she thought about people who use drugs changed. It was just one person sitting there relating to another person as two human beings who have been through stuff, because everyone's been through stuff. And when you sit down and you hear an individual story, it makes it more relatable. You know, and not just for people who are drug dependent, but also for people who use drugs recreationally or socially.
Liz, thank you. I think they just need to listen more and hear more from you. Mm-hmm. I hope that your new effort, Somebody's Child, which is perhaps one of the most important of the challenges we have to change people's attitudes. I hope it succeeds very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been great to chat.
Thank you, Maria and Liz, for this enlightening and moving discussion. Thank you all for watching, and hope to see you soon.